Welcome to Scheibach Studio. How did you like my yesterday's episode on assembling this beast? I loved it, it was so much fun. But I also promised you to talk specifically about the bolts we have on the bike and the torque we should use when tightening them. So here is the episode. I will just briefly tell you what kind of bolts we have on the bicycle, why should we use specific torque when operating on them, and also at the end of this episode I will show you some interesting models of the torque wrenches which help us a lot. But if you're not planning to do a lot of maintenance just by yourself with your bike, stay tuned for some tricks on how to roughly find out just by hand whether we use the right torque. So, not all the bolts in our bike should be tightened with the same force, and we should not use all the force we have in order to make it well. So we should remember about that. Now, we have some bolts which will be only like carrying the bottle cage, these two and these two for example, so not a lot of force working on this area and on the bolts. We have some bolts that are very important because they will tighten our seat post, for example, so the seat post won't go down, won't slide down. And also here we have the seat clamp that is pressing against carbon fiber frame and the carbon fiber seat post. That means we should be very careful when tightening this bolt. And then we have some bolts like the bolts assembling our crankset which have to work against a lot of force, and then we use a lot of torque right here. So that's very simple. When we tighten the bolts and we don't have a torque wrench, we should think about what kind of forces will be operating on the bolts and what kind of material we have here. Let's start with the bolts that will use the least of the torque, and that's, for example, the bottle cage bolts, only 2 Newton meters, and for example these lock-on grips, only 2 Newton meters, very small bolt here, 2.5 millimeter. Not a lot of force working on them. And how much is it? 2 Newton meters, let's start with that. It's not really a lot. If you want to try to do it just by hand, first off, I'd like to tell you that if I'm gonna use this short arm of my Allen key and try to do it as strong as I could have, I would do roughly 4 Newton meters. So when using this short arm of my Allen key, I will be able to push 4 Newton meters, so I'm just like average guy. I would say average guy will be able to do 4 Newton meters, but we only need 2 Newton meters. That means that now the bolt is loosened, now it stops, you can see, okay, it stops, and now I only do it like 15 degrees more so that I'll be sure that this bolt will not loosen up. Now I'm gonna try to do that with my torque wrench. So it stops here. How do we use the torque wrench? That's the one that will stay with us in the studio. I'm gonna buy this one. Seems to be the best for me. All right. This is the 4 millimeters exactly. Okay. This is the torque wrench. That's the wrench that will show me how much force I'm using. Here is the scale, and I'm able to set this one on 2 Newton meters. I'm locking it. Now I'm using my socket. Okay. And now I'm tightening the bolt until I hear a small click. Right here. So when I hear the click, I should not be pushing anymore, because I will be able to over tighten the bolts, but I'm only going till the click. So 2 Newton meters is not really a lot. It's twice as I could do twice as much using my short arm of this Allen key. All right, so this is 2 Newton meters. When we look at other bolts, this bolt is important, as I said, but we'll see that it's written here specifically 5 Newton meters. We have 5 Newton meters here. So this will be a bit more that I will be able to do with the short arm of my Allen key. So that's something to have in mind. Here I have the stem, and it says on the stem 5 Newton meters, same as on my seat post clamp. We have 2 bolts here. Remember, I have the alloy steerer here, and there is not a lot of force working on those 2 bolts. So 5 Newton meter is just enough, but for different stems with different bolts, you may have like maybe even 8 Newton meters of the torque. So remember about that. Now we have 6 Newton meters on my bar ends, for example, and between 5 and 8 for my levers, braking levers, and my shifter. So between 5 and 8. Now, how much is that? Once more, I would use, if I don't have a torque wrench, I would use my Allen key, and you only want to get to the point where when the lever doesn't move around. It doesn't have to be like super strong. Once it's quite tightened here, so those bolts will not loosen by themselves, and you're not able to just move around your lever, your shifter. That's fine, that's just enough. Important place for my bike is here. These are the clamps that are assembling the fork to the steering tube, and it says 9 Newton meters. So I'm gonna use my torque wrench in order to check that, because I don't want to break my crowns. I don't want to break those bolts. This is very, very important, because if this breaks, it can some injury can happen. Now we have these bolts, one and the bottom one, the other one here. So 2 bolts that will assemble the caliper brake to my fork, and that's between 6 and 8 Newton meters. So once more, that's not a lot. I will be easily able to do that using the longer arm of my Allen key. Just make sure it's tightened enough, those bolts won't loosen, and that's it. Because otherwise there is also not so much force working on these bolts, because when I'm braking those bolts, the caliper is actually pushing against the fork. But this is important place, this is your brakes, so you make sure you do it in the right way. And then we have the bolt for my crankset. Now this one specifically says 40 Newton meters. For square taper, that would be between 30 and 50. For Octalink, 35 and 55. So that's quite a lot. I would say that's pretty much all that I'll be able to do with this 10mm key. Okay, I'm not able to use this torque wrench. I'm gonna use a longer one, a larger one. But if I don't have one, that's pretty much all I can do with my Allen key. What I'm doing it just little by little, because the crankset will just press against the spindle and will allow me after a minute or two to do a little bit more of tightening. So it would be super good to have torque wrench, because you are preventing from, of course, injury, breaking anything, and also making some noises. The right torque is important here, but 40 Newton meters pretty much all that we can do with such an Allen key. Alright, so those mounting bolts, like also mounting bolts for my rear derailleur, for the cable of the shifting cable, that would be somewhere around between 6 and 8 Newton meters. You will be able to just find out by hand that the torque is right, because the bolt is quite stiff already and it won't be loosening by itself. But you don't want to do it with a lot of force, with all the force you have. And finally, the bolts for your saddle, clamping the saddle. If you have 1 bolt, that would be around 8 Newton meters. If you have 2 bolts, that would be around 8 Newton meters. If you have just 1, that would be twice as much, so maybe 16 Newton meters. All right, so remember, the average guy would do 4 Newton meters screwing it in just like that, tightening it like that. So I'm able to do 4 Newton meters. If you use 2 Newton meters, then you know it's just half of it. If you need 6, that would be a bit more. So you can do 4 and then tighten a bit more by using the longer arm. Of course, not this bolt, this one only requires 2 Newton meters. Make sure you know the right torque on your bike. Be very careful with carbon. Be super careful with the seat post clamp. When the seat post is going down while you ride, you tighten just a little bit more, but here I would really recommend to have a torque wrench. If you don't have it, try to do it really gently and then find out, mark it on the seat post whether it's going down or not, because that's super important. Now the torque wrenches. The torque wrench I have is pretty standard one. It's not expensive one, but just make sure you have the right torque range of this wrench. This one works for 2 Newton meters up to 24 Newton meters. So 2 up to 24. So I'm not able to do the crankset bolt with this one. For this one I would use a large one, but the large one also will require different sockets or bits, because this one is 1/2 inch and this one has the ending of the 1.4 inch. So make sure you know that you have the right tool. I don't think I will just keep this one for my crankset. I'm trying to do it only with my Allen key. It's not something I recommend, but it's something I probably can do with my experience. Now, 2 other models. These are like very budget ones. So torque wrench doesn't have to be very expensive. This one will work for up to 10 Newton meters. So up to 10 Newton meters. So most of the bolts you'll be able to do with this one. You have the sockets already. And this one will work by simply bending this scale here, and then it will show you how much of a torque you are using, up to 10. It won't be super accurate, but still it will, for example, save your seat post clamp against over tightening. So that's important thing. You don't want to be unscrewing any bolt with this one, only tightening those, okay? Because it is calibrated, so be careful with that. Very interesting model here is the toe pick. It looks quite interesting. It will also bend. So here is our wrench. Here is the scale. It looks like that. And when you see here on the picture, okay, this wrench, just by bending, will show us on the scale how much torque we use. Also only for tightening. This one from 0 up to 12 Newton meters. So most of the bolts, only not the crankset, but yeah, I think all the bolts except for the crankset you'll be able to do with this toe pick. Once more, it won't be super accurate, but it will do the job in my opinion. You have the sockets here as well. The one I've chosen is this one, bike hand, also with the beats, and this one will show me up to 24-25 Newton meters. You should never use more, because this thing is calibrated. All right, I hope it was helpful. If you have any further questions, put those in the comment section. One more thing. In my manual for my bike, they say 40 Newton meters for the spindle of my pedals. I use way less, and I'm not gonna use 40 Newton meters. I know this is very important. If you lose the pedal, you can, get injured. But 40 Newton meters for me, just as much as on the crankset, seems way too much. It would be difficult to replace those pedals. So I'm using maybe, I don't know, just around 20. This is not my recommendation, but that's something I was surprised with when reading my manual. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.